Sometimes the words we never say echo the loudest inside our hearts. They linger there, in the quiet corners of our memories, waiting to be spoken, waiting to be forgiven, waiting to be understood. This is the story of a woman who carried a secret for 40 long years. A secret sealed, not in a box, not behind a locked door, but inside a letter. A letter that was never sent. Her name was Eleanor. She was 70 years old. Her hair had turned silver, like the mist of early mornings. Her hands trembled when she poured her tea, but her eyes still carried a quiet spark of youth. She lived in a small white house at the end of Willow Street, a house that smelled of old books, lavender, and memories. Every morning, she would open her window to let the sunlight touch her face. The same ritual every day for 40 years. She would whisper to herself, another day, another chance, maybe today I will send it. But she never did. The letter lay inside a wooden dresser on the top shelf, under a stack of folded scarves. The envelope was pale yellow now, edges torn by time, the paper soft and thin like her own skin. It was addressed to Michael. Just Michael. No last name, no address, no return. Because the truth was, she did not know where he went, or if he even lived anymore. But she kept the letter, like one keeps a heartbeat. Something that reminds you you are still alive because of love that never died. Eleanor's days were quiet. The clock ticked softly, the kettle hissed when the water boiled, and the radio played faint old tunes from the 60s. Sometimes she would talk to herself, not because she was lonely, but because her words had nowhere else to go. Her voice was gentle, sometimes trembling, like the last note of a sad song. She often said to herself, life is strange, we spend so much time waiting for the right moment, and when it comes we are too scared to take it. She had written that letter when she was 30. She remembered the day clearly. It was raining outside, the kind of rain that makes you feel both alive and broken. She had sat by the window, writing until her tears mixed with the ink. She wrote about her mistakes, the words she wished she could take back, the love she had ruined. And she ended with, I am sorry, Michael, I am sorry for everything. But she never posted it. Fear stopped her. Guilt held her hand tighter than courage ever could. 40 years is a long time to carry silence. Sometimes she thought the silence had become her only friend. But deep inside, she still hoped. Maybe someday he would walk through her door. Maybe someday he would forgive her. Maybe someday she would stop punishing herself for something that happened when she was young, foolish, and afraid. That morning felt different though. The sky was clear. The air carried the scent of roses from her garden. She brewed her tea as always. She looked out the window and saw a young couple walking hand in hand. They were laughing. They looked like she and Michael once did, before life turned them into strangers. A faint smile touched her lips, and she whispered, maybe it is time. Maybe today I will send it. She walked slowly to her dresser, her knees aching a little, her heart pounding. Her fingers brushed against the scarves, and then found the letter. She held it close to her chest. The paper still smelled faintly of her perfume from long ago. For a moment, she felt like that young girl again, the one who had hope, the one who believed love could heal everything. Her eyes filled with tears. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding that letter as if it could still change her life. She whispered to the empty room, do you remember me, Michael? Do you still think of that day by the river? Do you remember how we promised never to hurt each other? Her voice cracked, because she had broken that promise first. Eleanor had loved Michael more deeply than words could say, but life had its cruel ways. A misunderstanding, a harsh word, a prideful heart. She left before she could explain, before she could say I am sorry. And time moved on without mercy. Years became decades. The faces around her changed, the seasons passed. But her heart remained there, in that one moment she never fixed. Sometimes at night, she dreamed of him. In her dreams, he was always smiling, always young. And she always tried to speak, But no sound came. Only tears and silence. That morning, she took the letter and placed it on her table, beside her cup of tea. The sunlight fell gently on it, making the ink shimmer faintly. She stared at it for a long time. 40 years of hesitation, 40 years of what if. She took a deep breath and whispered, maybe today. The phone rang suddenly, startling her. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. She spoke for a while, about nothing in particular. But all the while, Eleanor's eyes kept drifting back to that envelope. When she hung up, she felt that familiar ache again. The ache of unsent words. She thought of walking to the post office, but her hands shook too much. She thought of asking the postman to send it, but she feared he would ask too many questions. So she did what she always did. She put the letter back into the drawer, back into silence. The day passed quietly. She watered her plants, fed the birds, and listened to the sound of children playing down the street. Every laugh, every voice, reminded her of the years she had lost. But when the sun began to set, she sat by the window again. The sky turned orange, then pink, then faded into gray. She whispered, "Good night, Michael." And somewhere deep inside, she felt him whisper back. That night, she could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy but restless. She got up, walked to the dresser, opened it again. Her fingers found the letter without even looking. She held it tightly and whispered, "I will send it tomorrow, I promise." For the first time in years, she believed her own words. But fate has its own plans. The next morning, when the light touched her face, she felt an unfamiliar peace. She got up, made her tea, sat by the window, and just as she reached for the letter, there was a knock at the door. Her hand froze in the air. The sound echoed through the quiet house. She had not heard a knock in weeks. She whispered to herself, "Who could that be?" And that is where her story took a turn she never expected. Eleanor stood still. The sound of the knock echoed again through the quiet house. She had not heard a knock in so long that it almost felt like a sound from another life. She whispered softly, "Who could that be?" Her heart beating faster with each passing second. She moved slowly toward the door, her hands trembling, her feet dragging slightly on the wooden floor. As she reached the handle, she took a deep breath and opened it. A young man stood outside, maybe in his 30s, his eyes kind and gentle, his clothes a little dusty, as if he had been traveling for a long time. He held a small brown package in his hands and smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am," he said. "I have a delivery for you." Eleanor blinked, confused. "I did not order anything," she said softly, her voice shaking. The man smiled again. "It is from someone named Michael," he said. The world stopped for a moment. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. The name Michael felt like a whisper from the past, like a voice rising from forgotten years. Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest. She could barely speak. She reached out her hands slowly and took the package from him, her fingers brushing against the rough paper. "Thank you," she whispered faintly and closed the door gently. For a few moments, she just stood there, holding the box, staring at it as if it were alive. Her hands trembled. The box felt heavier than it looked. Her eyes filled with tears that refused to fall. She carried it to the table and sat down, her breath coming slowly, her lips moving silently as she whispered his name. "Michael, Michael," over and over again, as if saying it could bring him back. The room was filled with the ticking of the old clock, the faint rustle of the curtains, the sound of her heart beating. She ran her fingers along the tape that sealed the box, then stopped, afraid of what she might find inside. After a long silence, she whispered to herself, "It cannot be him, it must be some mistake." But still, she opened it carefully, tearing the tape with shaking fingers. Inside was a small wooden box, smooth and beautifully carved, with a note attached. The note read, "For Eleanor, from Michael." She froze again, Her breath caught in her throat. Her fingers moved slowly, lifting the lid. Inside was a folded piece of paper and an old photograph. She unfolded the letter with trembling hands and began to read. "If you are reading this, then I am already gone. I kept your letter all these years. I wanted to answer it, but I did not know how. I wanted to forgive you in person, but time was cruel, and so was my pride. I carried your words in my heart. They were the only part of you I had left. You said you were sorry, but Eleanor, you never had to be. I was the one who left. I was the one who walked away when love needed patience. I chose silence when love needed faith. I chose distance." Eleanor's tears began to fall quietly onto the paper, smudging the ink. She whispered, "Michael, I never stopped loving you either." The letter continued. "I lived a full life, but there was always an empty chair beside me, a quiet corner in my soul where you belonged. I never married. I never found that same laughter again. I used to walk by Willow Street, hoping to see you by the window, but I never had the courage to knock. I always hoped you were happy. I want you to know that I forgave you long ago, and I hope you forgive yourself too." Her hands shook so hard that she could barely hold the paper. She pressed it to her chest, her heart aching yet healing all at once. Then she looked at the photograph. It was of them both sitting under a tree, smiling, their faces bright with hope and love. She remembered that day. They had gone for a picnic by the river. She had fallen into the water, and he had laughed so hard. She had thrown water at him, and he had said, "Promise me you will never stop laughing." She smiled through her tears, remembering how he had looked in the sunlight, his hair messy, his eyes full of dreams. She whispered, "I broke that promise, Michael. I stopped laughing the day you left." The letter had one more line, written at the bottom in faded ink. It said, "When you read this, know that somewhere I am smiling, because finally the words we never said have found their way home." Eleanor sat silently for a long time. The house felt different now, not empty, but full of memories. She could feel his presence in every corner, as if he had been waiting all along for her to open that box. She got up and walked slowly to the window. The evening light was falling, soft and golden across the garden. The roses swayed gently in the breeze. She whispered, "Thank you, Michael, for remembering me, for forgiving me, for loving me still." That night, she placed the letter beside her bed. She lit a small candle and sat there, watching the flame dance. She felt both broken and whole. She felt the years melt away. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 40 years, she slept peacefully, without dreams, without regret, just quiet peace. The next morning, she woke up early, the sun rising slowly behind the trees. She held the letter again, her fingers tracing every word. She whispered, "I will not hide anymore. I will write again, one last letter." She sat down, took a fresh sheet of paper, and began to write. "My dear Michael, I do not know where you are, but I hope you can hear me somehow. Your words have reached me after all these years, and they have healed me in ways I never thought possible. I carried guilt and sorrow for too long, but today I let it go. I forgive myself, just as you forgave me. Thank you for teaching me that love never dies. It only waits patiently until the heart is ready to see it again. I will keep our memories safe, and I will smile for you every morning until I see you again." When she finished writing, she folded the paper, placed it in the same wooden box, and set it on the table beside his letter. Two stories finally side by side. The sun shone softly through the curtains, lighting the dust in the air like golden rain. Eleanor smiled and whispered, "Maybe now I can rest." She looked at the photograph one last time, her wrinkled fingers tracing the faces frozen in happiness, and whispered, "Goodbye, my love." The world outside kept moving, the birds sang, the children laughed, but inside that little white house, peace had finally found its home. It was a silent morning, the kind that feels heavy before the storm. The air carried a chill that touched the soul. Aunt May sat by the window again, her wrinkled hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the old mailbox across the street, as if the metal box held her entire past, her entire hope. For 3 weeks she had been waiting for a letter that she was not even sure would come. A letter from someone she once called her own. She whispered softly to herself, the words trembling out of her mouth. Maybe he forgot, maybe he moved on, but deep inside her heart screamed, no, he would not forget me. Every sound outside made her flinch. The distant hum of a car, the chirping of a bird, even the creak of the old mailbox lid. She looked up every time, her fragile body jolting with a flicker of hope that died within seconds, when it was not what she longed for. That morning, as the sun climbed over the horizon, painting the world in shades of gold, the mailman stopped at her gate. She watched him place something into the box and leave without noticing her presence. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart began to race faster than it had in years. She forced herself to stand. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet. She held the wall for balance as she made her slow way to the door, each step filled with fear and hope, all tangled into one trembling moment. Outside, the wind brushed through her gray hair. She reached for the mailbox, her hand shaking as though the truth inside was too heavy to touch. She opened it slowly and saw it, a small envelope, aged brown edges, the handwriting familiar, too familiar. Her lips quivered as she whispered his name. It was from her son, the boy she had not heard from in over a decade. Her eyes flooded with tears before she could even open it. She held it to her chest, whispering, thank you, God." She sat on the porch, the paper trembling in her weak hands. She tore the edge carefully, as if afraid that any roughness might break the fragile thread that connected them again. The letter was short, but every word hit her heart like thunder. He wrote that life had been cruel, that mistakes were made, that he was sorry, truly sorry, and that he missed her every single day. He said he was afraid to come back, afraid she would not forgive him, afraid she no longer wanted him. The words blurred as her tears fell over them. She read and reread, until the ink smudged, and the page looked like her memories, a mix of love, regret, and pain. She could hear his voice through the paper, broken, fragile, human. She placed the letter against her heart, and whispered through trembling lips, I forgave you long ago, my boy. I forgave you before you even left. The room around her seemed to breathe again. The loneliness that wrapped her for years began to melt. She stood with new strength, walked to her table, and picked up her pen. She took a clean sheet of paper and began to write her reply. My dear son, she began, there is nothing in this world you could do that would take my love away. You were my joy when you were born, and you remain my joy even now. I never stopped praying for you, never stopped waiting for you to come home. Her words flowed like a river of years lost, pain, and forgiveness. She told him about the house, the garden, the cat that still waited by his old chair. She told him how she sat by the window each morning, whispering his name to the wind, hoping it would carry her voice to him. And then she wrote the most important line, come home, my child. Not tomorrow, not someday, come home now. As she folded the letter, her heart pounded like it did when she was young. She sealed it carefully, kissed the envelope, and placed it in the same mailbox that had brought her the pain and now brought her hope. That night, she did not sleep. Her eyes stayed on the window, her lamp burning softly, casting golden light on her wrinkled face. She whispered prayers with every breath, her soul lighter than it had been in years. Days passed slowly. She counted every sound, the footsteps of the mailman, the rustle of leaves, the ticking clock on her wall. And then one afternoon, as the sun began to fade into the horizon, a shadow appeared at her gate. Her heart froze. She squinted her eyes, trying to see clearly. It was him, older than she remembered, taller, broader, his eyes searching the house, as if afraid it was a dream. She rose from her chair, the world spinning around her as she walked to the door. The floor creaked, the handle turned, and there he was standing in front of her, his eyes full of tears, his lips trembling. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking into pieces. And that was all it took. She reached out her trembling hands, touched his face, as if making sure he was real, and then pulled him into her arms. She cried like a storm that had finally found its rain. He cried too, their tears mixing, the years of distance melting into nothing. No words could carry what they felt in that moment. The silence between them was sacred, pure, filled with love that had never truly died. She whispered, "You came home." And he nodded, unable to speak. That evening, the neighbors saw a light glowing from Aunt May's window, brighter than it had been in years. They heard laughter, faint and broken, but alive. They saw smoke rise from her chimney, the smell of soup and bread drifting into the air. The world outside was still the same, but inside that little house, everything had changed. The loneliness had finally found its end. Later that night, when she sat beside her son, she told him stories of his childhood, stories she had repeated to herself for years, when the nights were too long. He listened quietly, his eyes soft, his hands holding hers gently, as if afraid she would disappear. In the corner of the room, the old clock ticked slowly, each second a whisper of time forgiven, healed. And when she closed her eyes for the night, her last thought was not of sorrow, not of the years lost, but of the miracle, that love, even when buried under pain, still finds its way home. The evening sky turned golden and soft. The light touched the edges of the trees and fell gently through the window of Aunt May's old house. She sat quietly in her wooden chair, her hands folded over each other, her eyes resting on her son, who was fixing the curtain rod near the wall. The sound of the metal touching the frame echoed through the small living room. It was the sound of life again, the sound she thought she would never hear inside this home. The days after his return had been filled with the kind of peace that words could not hold. She would wake early, before the sun touched the hills. She would make tea, the same way she used to when he was a child. The kettle would whistle softly, and the air would fill with the scent of mint and warmth. Her son would come down from his room, sleepy, hair messy, but smiling, the same smile she remembered from decades ago. She often found herself watching him secretly. Every time he smiled, her heart would whisper, "Thank you. Thank you for bringing him home, God." The house had changed. There were sounds now, laughter, voices, the clinking of spoons against plates. The creak of the stairs, that once echoed emptiness, now carried footsteps that meant family again. Her cat would curl at her son's feet, as if it too had forgiven the past, as if it too understood the miracle that had walked back through that gate. One afternoon, she found herself holding the letter he had written, the one that changed everything. The paper now creased from the number of times she had held it, read it, kissed it. She smiled softly, her eyes glistening with tears, not of pain, but of gratitude. She looked at her son, who sat across the room, reading an old book. She whispered, "I miss so many of your years." He lifted his eyes and said softly, "I missed yours too, Mom, but we have time now, don't we?" She nodded, smiling, her face glowing in the light that streamed through the window. But deep inside, Aunt May knew the truth. Time was not something she had much of left. Her body was slowing, her breath was shorter, her strength fading. But she felt no fear. She felt peace. She had seen the miracle of forgiveness. She had touched her son's face. She had heard laughter again inside her walls. She had lived enough to see love win. That night, she called him to sit beside her. She said, "I want to tell you something, my dear." He sat quietly, his eyes full of care. She took his hand and said, "When I was alone, I used to talk to you, even when you were far away. I told you my stories, my dreams, my regrets. I spoke to the walls and to the wind. I asked them to carry my words to you. I never knew if they reached you, But now that you are here, I realize maybe they did. He squeezed her hand, his voice shaking a little. They did, Mom. Maybe not through the wind, but through my heart. I always felt something pulling me back here. I just did not listen soon enough. Her eyes shone with tears. She whispered, that is how love works. It never leaves. It only waits quietly until we are ready to come home. The clock ticked softly on the shelf. The fire in the hearth burned low. The air filled with warmth and the faint smell of pine wood. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes on the flickering flames, and began to hum an old lullaby. The same one she used to sing when her son was a baby. Her voice weak, but still filled with sweetness. Her son listened, his throat tight, his eyes wet. He remembered lying in her arms as a child, the same song filling the air around him. Back then it was comfort, now it was memory. Days passed slowly. Winter touched the village again. Snow began to fall, covering the world in white. The house looked peaceful, under the soft weight of the snow. Inside, Aunt May sat near the fire, wrapped in her shawl, her breath visible in the cold. Her son made her tea every evening, the way she liked it, with honey instead of sugar. He would sit beside her, reading aloud from her favorite book. Sometimes she would close her eyes and smile at the sound of his voice. She told him stories about his father, about her youth, about the dreams she once had, about the lessons she learned too late. She told him that life is not about having everything, but about finding peace in the moments we are given. He listened to every word, storing them in his heart, as if he knew that soon her voice would become memory. One evening, as the snow fell heavier than before, she asked him to sit closer. He pulled his chair beside hers. She looked into his eyes and said softly, my child, when I am gone, promise me one thing. Never carry guilt. Let love guide you always. Forgive quickly, because forgiveness is what brings souls home. Promise me. He nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. I promise, Mom. She smiled, her hand trembling as she reached up to wipe his tear, but her fingers were too weak. He caught her hand instead, holding it tight between both of them. They sat silently, the firelight dancing across their faces, the snow whispering against the window. That night, after he helped her to bed, she asked him to leave the lamp on. She wanted to see the light as she fell asleep. She looked at the photograph on the bedside table. It was her son as a child, holding a small wooden toy. She closed her eyes, whispered thank you God, and slowly drifted into sleep. The next morning, the house was quiet. The fire had turned to ash. The air still. Her son knocked on her door softly. Mom, he said. No answer. He entered the room. She looked peaceful, as if she had fallen into the gentlest dream. Her hands folded on her chest, a small smile on her face. He sat beside her, unable to speak. He held her hand, still warm from the night before, and whispered, you kept your promise, you waited for me, and I came home. Thank you, Mom. He buried her beneath the old oak tree behind the house, the same tree she used to sit under when she would write her letters to the wind. He placed her favorite shawl beside her, and the letter she had written him, the one that said, come home, my child, not tomorrow, not someday, come home now. The village gathered. They spoke softly about Aunt May, about her kindness, about how she never stopped believing in love after everyone left. Her son sat alone by the grave, the snow falling gently around him. He looked up at the sky and whispered, I will keep your voice alive, Mom. I will tell your story so the world knows what forgiveness sounds like. And that night, he lit a candle by the window of the old house, the same place she used to sit. The light flickered softly in the dark, just like her heart had flickered through loneliness, through pain, through hope, until it became eternal. The next morning, a neighbor passing by said, she could swear she heard a soft hum coming from the window, a familiar tune, the lullaby Aunt May used to sing when the world was quiet and love was the only sound that mattered. The house stood still. but alive, filled with memories and whispers. Her presence lingered, not in body, but in every corner, in every photograph, in every echo of her laughter. And that is how Aunt May lived forever, not through time, but through love, through forgiveness, through the voice that still speaks, in the hearts of those who listen carefully. The world kept moving, the way it always does. The snow melted, the birds returned, the flowers bloomed again. The village breathed new life. But inside the old house, something sacred still lived. The scent of Aunt May lingered in the corners. Her voice seemed to echo in the wind. Her soft laughter felt stitched into the air itself. Her son would wake each morning, hearing her words in his heart. Forgive quickly, love deeply, never wait for tomorrow. The days after her passing were slow. He moved through the house quietly, afraid to disturb the memories. He would sit by her chair sometimes, resting his hand on the armrest, imagining she was still there beside him. She had left her diary on the table, its pages filled with her handwriting, thin delicate loops that carried the weight of a whole lifetime. He began reading it, page by page. Each word felt like a conversation across time. In those pages, she had written about everything: her childhood, her dreams, her mistakes, the loneliness that once haunted her nights, the prayers she whispered when she thought no one was listening. She had written about him too, about how she loved him even when he was far away, how she prayed for his safety every morning, how she kept his old toys, because they made her feel less alone. He read her words until his eyes blurred with tears. One sentence kept echoing in his mind: "My child, if you ever find this, remember that pain is not meant to destroy us. It is meant to soften us. It is meant to teach us how to love better." He closed the diary, held it against his chest, and whispered, "I understand now, Mom. I finally do." Days turned into weeks. He began to rebuild the garden she had once loved. He planted roses, lilies, and daisies around the oak tree where she rested. He spoke to her grave every evening, as if she were still sitting on the porch listening. He told her about his day, about how he had found peace, about how the village people still spoke kindly of her. One afternoon, while tending the garden, a little girl from the neighborhood stopped by. She held a bunch of flowers in her small hands and asked, "Mister, is this where the lady who used to give cookies lives?" He smiled through his tears and said, "Yes, this is where she lived. She was my mother." The girl nodded and said, "She was nice. She used to tell me stories about the moon." That night, he sat by the fireplace, thinking about those words, stories about the moon. He remembered how his mother's stories had comforted so many, how her voice had been like a balm for wounded hearts. An idea began to grow inside him, a quiet spark. He whispered to himself, maybe her stories should not die with her. Maybe the world still needs them. He opened his old laptop, the one that had gathered dust for years. He created a folder called The Voice of Her Heart. Inside it, he began writing each of her diary stories, giving them new life in his own words. He stayed up nights, recording soft narrations of her letters, her confessions, her gentle wisdom. Each recording felt like sitting beside her again, listening to her soft voice in the dim glow of the fire. He uploaded the first story to the internet. He titled it, The Letter She Never Sent. He wrote the description in her memory: "A mother's love never ends. It only waits for you to come home." When he clicked publish, he did not expect anyone to notice. But within days, thousands of people began to listen. Comments poured in from across the world. Strangers wrote, "I felt like this story was about my mom." Another said, "Her voice healed something inside me that I did not know was broken." He would sit every evening, reading those messages, his heart full, his eyes wet. He would look up at her photograph above the fireplace and whisper, "Look, Mom, they heard you, your voice is still here." The channel grew slowly but steadily. People started calling it the voice of Aunt's heart. And though he never told anyone who he was, it felt right. It felt like she was still speaking through him. through the stories she left behind, through the lessons she had lived through pain and forgiveness. Months turned into years. The house that once felt lonely now buzzed with a quiet energy. Visitors would stop by, to see the old garden, to sit under the oak tree, to leave notes that said, "Thank you, Aunt May, for teaching me to forgive. Thank you for reminding me that love never dies." He built a small wooden bench beside the tree, with an engraving that read, "She spoke softly, but her words moved mountains." He would often sit there at dusk, watching the sunset, feeling the same peace she once felt, knowing she was home, knowing she had found her forever. One winter evening, as he sat by the fire, his grown daughter walked in, holding a notebook. She said, "Dad, I wrote something, and I want you to hear it." She began to read softly. It was a story about a grandmother who loved too deeply and forgave too easily. A woman who believed in the good in everyone. Her voice trembled as she finished, and whispered, "I called it The Heart of Aunt May." He looked at her, smiled, and said, "She would have loved that. You know," she would have said, "see how love passes down, like sunlight through the leaves, never gone, only softer." That night, he wrote another entry in his mother's diary. It said, "Your legacy lives on, Mom, not through the house or the garden, but through the voices that tell your story, through the hearts that listen to your words." Years later, when the man grew old and gray, he still recorded stories, his voice slower, but full of warmth. One of his last narrations began with the words, "This story is for everyone who ever lost someone, and still feels them in the wind, in the stars, in the quiet moments before sleep." When he passed, his daughter took over the channel. She kept his recordings alive. She uploaded them with love and care. She spoke softly, just like her grandmother once did. The name of the channel remained the same, Voice of Aunt's Heart, because that was what it truly was, not a brand, not a project, but a pulse that never stopped beating. And even now, somewhere across the world, in a small room, in the middle of the night, someone presses play on one of those stories. A voice begins to speak gently, telling them that forgiveness heals, that love never leaves, that the people we miss are never truly gone. The candle still burns in the window of the old house. The garden still blooms every spring. And when the wind passes through the trees, it carries a whisper, a song, a memory. The voice of Aunt's heart lives on.